Fellas, UFC 308 just went down. That was an amazing pay-per-view. I'm going to say that's top 3 best pay-per-views of the year. A lot of talking points to come from that pay-per-view. We ain't got time to waste. We're going to be matchmaking every fighter after UFC 308. I'm going to put timestamps on this video, so if you're only interested in the main card, you can skip to that. But we'll start off with every winner from the prelims. Just skim through the prelims, each winner and who I think they should be in with next. Rinat Fakhretdinov won on the first fight of the card against Carlos Leal. And I said this in the community post, and a lot of people online are agreeing. That might have been one of the biggest robberies I've seen in UFC history. Rinat Fakhretdinov, his past couple of fights have all been very close and controversial. This has definitely been the most. The judge that gave Rinat Fakhretdinov 30-27 needs to be sacked on the job immediately. Carlos Leal comes into the UFC, and I understand he was roided up. You can literally see the injection marks on his chest and everything. But the fact that Rinat Fakhretdinov won that fight is crazy. I thought that was a very clear win to Carlos Leal. I thought he won round 2 and round 3 in that fight. Let's run it back. I don't want to see Rinat Fakhretdinov against a step up in competition because he doesn't deserve it. I think Carlos Leal deserves to be rewarded. So I think the only way to settle it is to run it back. Sometime next year, Carlos Leal versus Rinat Fakhretdinov with better judges outside of Abu Dhabi. I don't want to see it on that Saudi Arabia card in February because it's going to go the exact same way. It was a robbery. I'm not trying to take away from Rinat Fakhretdinov. Carlos Leal definitely won that fight. I want to see them both run it back. Next fight on the card, we had Farid Basharat get a win over Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo was crafty and, like I said, but Farid Basharat, good prospect in the bantamweight division. I forgot what his record is, but he's undefeated. He called for a ranking spot. I don't think he deserves a ranking spot just yet in the bantamweight division, but he definitely needs to get close to it. And I think Ricky Simon is that good fight for Farid Basharat. I feel like Ricky Simon's now kind of like not really a gatekeeper, but I feel like he's one of those guys that if you beat Ricky Simon, it's kind of a ticket to getting ranked. And I feel like that's a good test for Farid Basharat because Ricky Simon's tough. He's got really good, well, I won't say he's got really good grappling, but he's got grappling, comes from a grappling background which can test Farid Basharat, and he's not too bad on the feet. He's tough on the feet. Coming off a bit of a losing streak, just got outschooled by Vinicius Oliveira. I think this is a good step up for Farid Basharat. If he can beat Ricky Simon, give him that ranking fight that he wants. And obviously for Ricky Simon, it's a good chance to get it back in the Willingham by beating undefeated Farid Basharat. I do think Farid Basharat is ranking potential. I just don't know if he's earned it yet. And if we do give him somebody ranked, maybe we give him somebody like Montel Jackson or Jonathan Martinez if he loses his next fight. But I would say Ricky Simon, Farid Basharat should be the next step up for Farid Basharat. The next fight we got is Kennedy I always fuck up pronouncing this dude's name. Kennedy Nzechukwu. Just got that win over what's his name? Chris Barnett. I don't know what's next for Chris Barnett, man. The dude got injured. He's 5'8" in the heavyweight division. I think he got injured jumping. I don't want to see him get cut from the UFC, but because he's a fun guy. He's one of the few fun heavyweights. He's just not that talented. But no, Kennedy looked good in the heavyweight division, and I said this coming into it. I want to see him against Martin Badai, but I said coming into it, moving from the light heavyweight division to the heavyweight division, you're always going to have success because the competition is a lot worse. I want to see Kennedy against Martin Badai. He was kind of like a mid-light heavyweight, was Kennedy, but now I want to see him against Martin Badai. Martin Badai, I think he's undefeated in the UFC apart from his loss to Shamil Gaziev. He's coming off a win over Andrei Arlovsky. I think this can be another good fight for Kennedy if he can beat Martin Badai, who's looked pretty good against the other heavyweights. That can get Kennedy close to the ranking spot in the heavyweight division, which I do think he has potential because, like I said, if you're somewhat talented in the heavyweight division, you're going to get ranked. And for Martin Badai, he can beat a fairly, I'm not going to say big name, but a name from the light heavyweight division in Kennedy. And if Martin Badai can beat Kennedy, that gets him close to the rankings, and he'll be on a winning streak as well. So Kennedy Nzechukwu, I want to see him against Martin Badai next. Test him in the heavyweight division against someone that's actually going to be skilled, not a 5'8" Chris Barnett against a 6'5" Kennedy. Abbas Magomedov, really good win over Bruno Ferreira. Bruno Ferreira's fight IQ needs to be tested in the lab. So many times he nearly finished Abbas Magomedov and went for a spinning elbow, which I didn't understand. Abbas Magomedov, I want to see him against the loser of Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov, which is the closest you can get to the rankings without actually being ranked, because they're going to be taking each other on. Like I said, I don't think Abbas Magomedov deserves a ranked fight. He's already fought 2 ranked fighters and lost to Kyle Browler and Sean Strickland. I want to see him against a talented top guy. If Roman Kopylov loses to Chris Curtis, I think Roman Kopylov versus Abbas Magomedov is a real interesting fight. And if Magomedov can get past Kopylov, get him in the rankings. And if Chris Curtis, who's basically just been sat in the top 15 of the welterweight division for ages, middleweight division for ages, if he loses to Roman Kopylov and gets kicked out the rankings, I think Chris Curtis is a really good match, well, really bad matchup for Abbas Magomedov, but a good win if he can beat Chris Curtis. So I think the loser of Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov, who has just been announced to be fighting next year, I think they should fight Abbas Magomedov, and then we can start talking about ranked fighters if Abbas Magomedov gets past him. And I think they're both fun fights. Kopylov and Curtis are both really good strikers. Their grappling seems to have improved in the past couple of fights. And Abbas Magomedov is on a bit of a winning streak right now, just beat Bruno Ferreira, his best win yet. I want to see that for Abbas Magomedov. And then we had Rumbetsky. Rumbetsky versus Mitabeka Obai might be the best fight of 2024. I know we had a really good fight. I forgot who it was on UFC 306. I forgot who it was, that tall Mexican dude. I forgot what his name is. But Rembetsky versus Orabai just had a potential fight of the year. They're going to be out for ages. Rembetsky got the win. It wasn't a robbery. I thought Rembetsky won that 29-28. I want to see him get close to the rankings. He did lose to Fahad in his last fight pretty badly. I want to see him versus Drew Dober. Tell me that Rembetsky versus Drew Dober wouldn't be just violence. Drew Dober's been kind of failing to pick up a winning streak. He just lost to Gene Silver. Pretty sure he lost his fight before that as well. Rembetsky versus Dober would just be pure violence, man, in the lightweight division. Two very powerful strikers, two guys that are always in fun fights, two guys that have a decent grappling base. Rembetsky versus Drew Dober, somewhere on a fight night or wherever you put it. I think this will be an absolute bloodbath. They've both just come off amazing fights. Rembetsky's always in a fun fight. Even when he was getting battered by Fahad, it was a fun fight. And now that he's done that to Orabai, shut down the prospect, and that Drew Dober has always been a top lightweight, I want to see Rembetsky versus Drew Dober just because of the bloodbath that this would produce. But yeah, all respect to Rembetsky, man. The dude just put on arguably the best fight of 2024 against Orabai. Massive comeback from Orabai. It was a bloodbath. They were both bruised up. Such a good fight. But yeah, I want to see him get that little bit of step up against Drew Dober. Good comeback fight for Drew Dober as well. This should interest him, especially after how Rembetsky looked against Orabai. And then for Ibo Aslan, I was done picking against him. Big prospect in the light heavyweight division. He's massive in Turkey for some reason. And he looked like the Sergey Pavlovich. Turkey, you have a Sergey Pavlovich. He just went out there, absolutely destroyed Sakara. Just a barrage of punches against the cage. Didn't stop throwing and got the finish. Very powerful light heavyweight. Like I said, reminds me a bit of Pavlovich. I want to see him against Ian Cutelaba. Ian Cutelaba, he seems to have improved a little bit. He was always kind of one of those shit light heavyweights that he's still looking to be in the UFC. But he's coming off a win against that dude that came from KSW. I forgot his name, but no, Ian Cutelaba seems to have picked up a bit of skill recently. I think this is a good test for Aslan. We're not giving him an absolute killer, and we're not just going to shut down the hype, but we're giving him someone that's going to brawl with him. We're going to give him someone that's that step up, somebody that has the capability to win. I think Ian Cutelaba versus Aslan, fiery fight, violent fight, and the winner. I mean, if Aslan can get past Ian Cutelaba, that shows us that he is talent in the light heavyweight division. He's got potential in this division, and with a couple of fights, we might be able to see him against some ranked fighters. So I think Aslan versus Cutelaba would be a good fight. And then for the main card, Rafael dos Anjos got dropped twice against Jeff Neal and then got injured. Listen, I know he's a legend, and I know he's probably still got the capability. He's not as washed as somebody like Tony Ferguson, but I think for dos Anjos, I don't really want to see him in the octagon anymore. With all due respect, he's a legend, and he just doesn't really have a reason to fight. He keeps bouncing up and down weight classes. He's now just been injured by Jeff Neal. He's not going to be getting any ranked fighters. He's getting old. He just doesn't really need to fight anymore. I feel like he should just call it quits and retire. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. So for Rafael dos Anjos, even though he's not completely washed, and I still think he could probably pick up a win against a Khan, I just don't really think he needs to be fighting anymore. So I would rather see Rafael dos Anjos retire. I think that's a smart move for him, especially now that he's injured and he's 40 years old. Just go and enjoy retirement. You're a legend, whatever you know, just go and enjoy retirement. And for Jeff Neal, got a really good win. His boxing looked really crisp in that fight. Obviously, it only really looked good because he's facing Rafael dos Anjos, who's, top 15 in the lightweight division, coming off 2 losses. But I wanted to see him fight up, and I think him versus Gilbert Burns is the perfect fight to make. 2 top 10 welterweights going at it. I'm surprised they've never fought before, to be fair. Gilbert Burns, he's on a bit of a losing streak. Lost to Bilal Muhammad, lost to Jack Della Maddalena, and now just lost to Shaw Brady. He's towards the end of his career as Gilbert Burns, but he's still a dangerous guy. It was only a couple of years ago when he was on a winning streak. And for Jeff Neal, he was also on a losing streak before the fight with dos Anjos, losing to Ian Gary and Shavkat. But I think this would be a really good fight. You've got the boxing of Gilbert Burns, you've got the boxing of Jeff Neal, the grappling of Gilbert Burns. The winner of this fight can get a bigger fight, maybe against somebody like Buckley or whoever else is popping in the welterweight division. So Neal versus Burns, potential fight night main event. Like Neal versus Burns in the Apex next year would be a solid fight night main event. So Neal fighting upwards, Burns fighting down, Jeff Neal, Gilbert Burns, I think that should be next. And then for Petrosian, good kickboxer. He got finished pretty brutally by Sharipute Magomedov, to be fair. I still think he's a talented kickboxer. I want to see him against Cedric Damas. Cedric Damas, I don't know his record off by heart. I know he got finished by Ruzi Boy, but he's on a bit of a winning streak. He beat Dennis Tululin in his last fight. I think that was on the other Abu Dhabi card. So I think Cedric Damas needs a bit of a step up. Arman Petrosian needs a bit of a step down. I think Arman Petrosian and Cedric Damas could be a good fight as well. 2 very good kickboxers. I think this could be a good striking matchup on the feet for Arman Petrosian. A winnable fight for him as well. I think he'd probably beat Cedric Damas. But if Cedric Damas, who seems to have a bit of hype, can get past Arman Petrosian, creates big opportunities. So I think Arman Petrosian versus Cedric Damas. And then Sharipute Magomedov, he might have the worst call-outs ever. I remember in his last fight, he called out Nick Diaz, which just ain't going to happen. And now he's called out Adesanya. I like the confidence, but you've had 4 wins in the UFC. You're unranked. You ain't getting number 1 Adesanya. I want to see him against a fight that I match made after UFC 3 or 7. Kevin Holland, I think this is the perfect fight to make. Shara's in that position now where he's had 4 fights in the UFC, 2 finishes. He's looked really good. They got a brutal finish over Armor Petrosyan, and he needs that one fight that can get him really close to the rankings. And Kevin Holland would be the biggest name that Magomedov has fought. It would be the biggest test. It would be a massive fight for Sharapoutin Magomedov. And if he can beat Kevin Holland, it shows us that he's ranked potential in the middleweight division, because Holland is a good middleweight as well. Good comeback fight for Holland as well. A chance to, it's a winnable fight for him to shut down a guy with a ton of hype. Why doesn't this could be a potential fight night main event? I know the UFC are going to Saudi Arabia next year. Saudi Arabia fight night main event, Sharapoutin Magomedov versus Kevin Holland. Co-main event, Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. Who says no? So I think Sharapoutin Magomedov, Kevin Holland, big fight, to a big prospect versus a guy we're all aware of. Winnable fight for both of them. I think this would be an absolute banger as well for like a main event, because Sharapoutin keeps calling for a main event, and if he can get past Kevin Holland, it shows us that he's ranked potential. I think this is a big fight for both of them. Then Dan Ige. Looked a bit off in that fight with Lerone Murphy. I don't think he looked terrible, but I think Dan Ige has kind of displayed that we need to keep him away from ranked fighters for a while. I don't know how many exactly, but he's lost to like 5 or 6 ranked fighters. He's on a losing streak. I think he needs to welcome an unranked fighter to the division. So I think him versus William Gomez could be a really good fight. William Gomez, he's on a massive winning streak. Big prospect from France. Just beat Anderson Brito. I think Anderson Brito got robbed, but he is coming off a win, and he does deserve a ranked fight now. I think Dan Ige versus William Gomez is a really good fight. William Gomez is a really quick, flashy kickboxer who tends to struggle with grappling, and a power puncher like Dan Ige, who also has the grappling, could be a big test for William Gomez, because if William Gomez can beat Dan Ige, well, he's earned his spot in the ranking. We kind of forget about the robbery that he had over Anderson Brito. But again, it's a chance for Dan Ige to get a win over a big French prospect. So Dan Ige, William Gomez, great fight on the feet. If this is like a 3-rounder, I think this would be an amazing fight. And, you know, it can be a good chance for William Gomez. And then for Lerone Murphy, called out Josh Emmett. I don't mind that matchup, but I feel like Josh Emmett kind of deserves to fight a ranked fighter above him, because he did just brutally KO Bryce Mitchell a year ago. I think I also am bought on the fight with Brian Ortega and Josh Emmett. So for Lerone Murphy, he deserves a step up. He came out, he's got 2 ranked wins now, Edson Barboza and Dan Ige. So I want to see Lerone Murphy against Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar got dominated early this year against Aljamain Sterling at UFC 300. I think this is a really good test for Lerone Murphy, because Calvin Kattar, even though he might look, you know, he keeps losing consistently. Whenever you give him somebody elite, he always loses. But it's a big test, because Calvin Kattar, a great boxer, that's all he's really got going for him, but it would be the biggest test for Lerone Murphy. If Lerone Murphy can beat Calvin Kattar, he's welcomed himself to the top 10, and potentially from there we can get a top 5 matchup for Lerone Murphy. A good chance for Calvin Kattar to come back against somebody that's not necessarily elite on the feet, but also not elite in grappling. Like, he's not Aljamain Sterling levels on the ground, but, you know, he's not like Holloway or any elite striker on the feet. So Murphy versus Calvin Kattar, I think that's a good step up for Lerone Murphy. And then for Alexander Rakic, I think Rakic has got the potential to be a really solid fighter. He just misses a few things. Like, he's a good kickboxer, he's a good wrestler. His output isn't the highest. I feel like I don't really understand his game plan. His coaches were telling them that he was up 2 rounds when he definitely wasn't. For Rakic, I think he should fight the winner of Bogdan Guskov and Johnny Walker. Bogdan Guskov and Johnny Walker are going to be taking each other on. I forgot which card it is, but it's early next year. And I think the winner of that fight should face Alexander Rakic. I mean, if Johnny Walker can get a good win over Bogdan Guskov, I think Walker versus Rakic would be a really good fight. 2 pretty good kickboxers who aren't good enough for the top level. I think that'd be a really good fight. And the big prospect in the light heavyweight division, Guskov, if he can get past Johnny Walker, I think this is a really good fight to welcome Guskov into the top 5. So Alexander Rakic, I think he should face the winner of Bogdan Guskov versus Johnny Walker. To be fair, I think Rakic being in the top 5 is a bit fraudy, to be fair. His best wins are Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith. Apart from that, he kind of just looks good losing. So I think he should fight the winner of Bogdan Guskov and Johnny Walker. I think that's probably a smart move for him. And then for Ankalaev, I mean, it's not rocket science who he fights next. It is Poatan. Poatan versus Ankalaev for the light heavyweight belt. I mean, this should have been, to be fair, the main event of UFC 307. Nothing against Khalil Roundtree. Obviously, he performed great, but Ankalaev wasn't a number 1 contender then. Now that he's gone out there and beat Alexander Rakic, it wasn't an absolutely amazing performance. Not that he was bad, but he didn't go out there and sleep him in the first round. He didn't go out there and put on a statement-making performance. He kind of just, cruised to a decision against Alexander Rakic. But he has earned his shot at the belt. It is probably the most intriguing fight in the light heavyweight division. Really tough fight for Poatan as well. I'm not saying I pick against him, but I think Ankalaev, stylistically, because he's got the grappling in the back pocket and his striking seems to be pretty good, it's a tough fight for Poatan. So Poatan versus Ankalaev, potentially the last fight at light heavyweight for Poatan, but if Ankalaev can come and spoil the show, he gets his shot at the belt, and I think he has earned it now. I think he's like 20-1. So Ankalaev, Poatan, it is the fight next in the light heavyweight division. It makes the most sense, and it is what I want to see. And then we have Whittaker. Now, I don't know what happened in that fight. I don't know if he broke his jaw or if he dislocated his neck. There's a lot of things going around. I haven't really read into it, but he looked terrible. He didn't look terrible. I expected that grappling onslaught from Khamzat Chimaev, but he just got taken down, got put in a rear naked choke, and within a couple of seconds, I don't know if it was a rear naked choke or a neck crank, but within seconds he tapped. The problem is he's already fought most people in the top 10. He needs a bit of a step down. He's going to be out for a while. I think the only fight that makes sense, and you might look at me crazy for this, but I think it's got to be Roman Dolidze. You might be thinking this is disrespectful to Whittaker, but who else is there? It's not going to be anyone else in the top 5 coming off a win, because with all due respect to Whittaker, they're going to want someone higher, and he's going to be number 4 now. It's not going to be Vettori because he's fought him. It's not going to be Cannonier because he's fought him, and they're both coming off losses. It's not going to be Brendan Allen. I guess the only other guy that Whittaker can fight, unless he waits out for a while and waits for the division to move, is Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze's on a 2-fight winning streak. He got a good win over Anthony Smith in the light heavyweight division, and he just beat Kevin Holland by finish, but he broke his rib. Roman Dolidze's going to want to fight up. I think Whittaker versus Dolidze, fight night main event next year. Just get Whittaker back in the winning column. It gets in, it gives him another win. I just don't really understand what's next for Whittaker. I don't think he's ever going to become a champion again. He got beaten by Adesanya, the champion. He got beaten by Dricus, the champion. He's just been finished by Chimaev in the first round. He's going to need a step down in competition after that. Not that he's not a top fighter or anything, but I guess it's the only fight left for Whittaker. Whittaker versus Dolidze got finished pretty quickly, tapped within seconds, didn't even let it sink in or anything. I'm sure he's injured or whatever. He's probably going to beat himself up after that performance, but Whittaker versus Dolidze next year. Good opportunity for Dolidze as well, because if he can somehow beat Whittaker, Dolidze is back in the top 5 despite being fraud-checked numerous times. And for Khamzat Chimaev, amazing performance. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he only won because it was an injury. No, he broke Whittaker's jaw. Even if Whittaker did have an injury, the injury was caused by Chimaev's grip strength just squeezing the life out of him. So you can't take away from Chimaev. It's got to be a title shot next. I think Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis, whether it's before Strickland, whether it's after Strickland, whether it's instead of Strickland, I think the next fight for Chimaev has to be a title shot. He just beat Whittaker coming off an amazing 2-fight winning streak. He's undefeated as Chimaev, just beat Usman, just beat Whittaker in the middleweight division. He's got to get a title shot next. To do that to Robert Whittaker as well, a statement-making performance. I think he's got to fight Dricus du Plessis, and I think it's a really intriguing fight because Dricus du Plessis, I know a lot of people say this about Chimaev, but I really do think he's kind of like a stylistic nightmare for Chimaev. So Chimaev has earned his shot at the belt. We've been waiting for him to get a title shot since his UFC debut. I think now was the time. He looked better than ever. Went out there and ragdolled Whittaker like it was Kevin Holland all over again. It's got to be a title shot next, whether it's before or after Strickland. Du Plessis, Chimaev. Maybe we do Du Plessis versus Strickland early next year and then Chimaev later next year when they do their Abu Dhabi pay-per-view next year, or whatever the order is. He needs to get a title shot next. Great performance by Chimaev. Got the finish over Robert Whittaker and proved that he is top 5 and even champion potential in the middleweight division. And he kind of reminds me of Khabib, because Khabib, he's kind of that, everyone knows what he's going to do. He's going to take you down and dominate you. And I feel like Chimaev's got that similar kind of aura because he's undefeated, ragdolls everyone. Everybody knows what's coming, but nobody can stop it. Just give him his belt, man. Chimaev versus Du Plessis. For Max Holloway, man, I'm going to talk about Ilya in a second. I don't really know what's next for Max Holloway. I don't really want to see him in the featherweight division. Not that he's not capable. I mean, he was winning that fight against Topuria until he got finished, and he's obviously a former champion. But I feel like he does a lot better. He looked a lot better in the lightweight division. I want to see Holloway against fresh opponents in the lightweight division rather than trying to chase another title shot in the featherweight division because, let's be honest, he's probably not going to win because he lost to Volkanovski 3 times, just got KO by Topuria. Move up to the lightweight division, and a fun fight for Holloway, the loser of Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler. Now, in the next pay-per-view, UFC 309, Oliveira and Chandler are going to be taking each other on, and I think the loser of that fight could have a really fun fight with Max Holloway. It's a fun fight to welcome Max Holloway back into the lightweight division against a top opponent, because I don't want to see Holloway against a low-ranked opponent or a no-name, because he is still a top guy. I mean, it was only 2 fights ago when he just knocked out Justin Gaethje. So Holloway versus Charles Oliveira would be a banger. I know they fought before. Let's have a rematch if Oliveira loses to Chandler, and if Chandler loses to Oliveira, he would have had like 5 losses in the UFC. And I still think Holloway versus Chandler could be a really good fight. So for Max Holloway, him versus the loser of Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler could be a good fight to, dip his feet back into the lightweight division, because I do think he should move to lightweight, because first of all, obviously the performances are better in the lightweight division, but even if he is still capable of winning in the featherweight division, he's fought most of the top 10. I'd just rather see him in a fresh division in the lightweight division in fun fights for the remainder of his career. And then for Ilya Topuria, this dude is a superstar, man. A couple of years ago, Holloway and Volkanovski were the cream of the crop in the featherweight division. Those guys were the guys at the top. Nobody was taking their spot. For Topuria to come in and knock them both out back to back, this dude is him. He's undefeated. He's just knocked out Max Holloway in impressive fashion. The first guy to knock out Max Holloway and crack that chin. This dude this dude's so impressive. I want to see Ilya Topuria I don't want to see him against Volkanovski. Why does anyone want to see that fight? Give Volkanovski the winner of Sterling and Evloev. And in the meantime, let's do Ilia Topuria versus Diego Lopes. Diego Lopes is next in line. He's not undefeated, but he is coming off a good win over Brian Ortega. He's on a big winning streak. Chaotic striker in the top 3. He's the next contender. Ilia Topuria versus Diego Lopes. Would it be a firefight? I would favour Topuria by finishing this fight. I do think he beats Topuria. I do think he beats Lopes. I think Topuria's got potential to hold on to that featherweight belt for the longest time. I don't see anyone taking that belt away from him. But if there's a guy who's earned a title shot, if there's a guy who's chaotic, it is Diego Lopes. So Ilia Topuria versus Diego Lopes for the featherweight belt, I think has to be next. And then Volkanovski, if he wants his shot at the belt, I think he's got to face the winner of Evloev and Sterling. Not that he hasn't earned a title shot, but do we really want to see him back? He's been inactive for good reason. He should have been inactive, but he got KO'd by Topuria in his last fight, and I think the exact same thing would happen again. Topuria versus Lopes, fresh blood in the featherweight division. Chance for Lopes to get his title shot. In the meantime, let's see Volkanovski versus the winner of Sterling and Evloev on that perf card. But that is me matchmaking every fighter after UFC 308. Really good pay-per-view, man. I think it's probably the second or the third best pay-per-view of the year, just behind UFC 300. A lot of good finishes, a lot of good fights in there. The main and the comment event really performed. So let me know your thoughts on UFC 308 and these matches, and thank you for watching.